Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's virtual West Cork Literary Festival event. Thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you to Nektaria Anastasiadou for joining us from Istanbul and Denyse Woods for joining us from West Cork. Before I hand you over to Nektaria and Denyse, I just want to say a couple of words to thank our audience for being here and to let you know that if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button. You can chat to each other using that button, and over to the right, there's a Q&A button, and you can use that to put questions to Nektaria. And then towards the end of the event, Denyse will choose a few of the audience questions for Nektaria. We have a full schedule of events at West Cork Literary Festival throughout the month of July, and these are now on our website, westcorkmusic.ie/LF program. Our virtual events are a mix of live Zoom events and also some events that we pre-recorded in Bantry. We will also have a number of outdoor events with intimate audiences taking place in Bantry from Saturday the 10th to Monday the 12th of July. And we're announcing those over this weekend. So we hope to see you at some of these events, whether in person or virtually, and hopefully we'll all be able to gather in Bantry again soon. All of our events are made possible by the support of our funders, the Arts Council of Ireland, Cork County Council and their Library and Arts Services, Vulture Ireland and the Creative Europe programme of the European Union. Nektaria's book, A Recipe for Daphne, and all the other books in our festival lineup are available from Bantry Bookshop, and we would encourage you to order your books from them or to support your own local bookshop wherever you live. I'm going to hand you over now to Denyse Woods. Denyse is the author of 6 novels, including Overnight to Innsbruck and Of Sea and Sand, and she recently published Indian Pacific and Other Travels, a short collection of fiction and non-fiction. Denyse lives in County Cork and she teaches creative writing for Cork County Council, Art Services and Mallow College. So I'll hand you over now to Denyse and then she will introduce Nektaria, and I hope you all enjoy this afternoon's event.
Thanks, Emer. It's really lovely to be here and to be part of this virtual event. And good afternoon and good evening to our audiences, whether you're in Ireland or Greece or Turkey or anywhere in between or beyond. You're very welcome to this celebration of a delicious novel, A Recipe for Daphne, and its author, Nektaria Anastasiadou. Nektaria, I wish I could welcome you to Ireland, and more than that, I wish I could welcome you to beautiful West Cork and Bantry, where the festival usually takes place, but at least I can share this Irish afternoon with you, and you're very, very welcome to the West Cork Literary Festival.
Thank you very much, Denyse. Hello to everyone.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. It could be a little louder, slightly louder, maybe.
Am I better now speaking?
That's better. Yeah, that's great. So look, A Recipe for Daphne is your debut novel, but it's, you know, you've had a lot of success previous to that with short stories and other writings. You've been published in the Huffington Post and the Shanghai Review and the American Fiction Anthology, amongst others. And you've also won a very prestigious, I think, Greek Istanbul prize. I'm going to try it, okay, but I'll probably butcher it. The Zografesh Agon Award. How did I do? Is that about right?
It's close, yeah.
I'll have to do. Okay, which is a very long history and it's dedicated to Istanbul, Greek. So I hope we'll be able to talk about that later, maybe when we're discussing about your current projects. Nektaria, A Recipe for Daphne is, you know, all reviewers agree it's a literary gem, and it's also a comic tour de force, I think, as well. But reading it as I was in January, in a cold, miserable, locked down January, I thought it's really also a novel for our times, because it is concerned with, it's a very bright novel, and it's concerned with the important things in life, you know, like love. I think there are five love stories woven into the thread, and friendship and family and of course and home and of course food. But that's not to say that it's an escapist novel. It is very uplifting, but it's also very grounded. because I suppose wherever there is light, there's also shadow. And in this case, the shade is from, you know, the lived experience of the Rum community, the lived history, I should say, of the Rum community in Istanbul. Or as one of the characters describes it, you know, the mess of the past. And you've managed somehow to just connect the two so elegantly in one book. You know, and the end result is that it's a very moving novel. Just a quick writer's question. I mean, it's never easy to write a novel, but you know, some novels are more fun to write than others. Did you enjoy the creation of this novel? I mean, you must have been having fun a lot of the time.
Parts of it. I enjoy editing much more than I do writing the first draft. The first draft is the worst part for me.
Yeah.
I wrote the first draft probably within 6 months, but you know, the first draft is rubbish. So then I spent many years editing it. I think I enjoy writing now more than I did then. First of all, I think I do enjoy writing in Istanbul Greek more than I enjoy writing in English. But I think it's more just that I have had more practice, so it's not quite as difficult as it used to be. I think that's really the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, you are translating it yourself now, aren't you?
I'm also translating a recipe for Daphne now, because I'm translating it into Greek because I don't want it translated into Athenian Greek. Most Greek fiction set here has the characters speaking pretty much like Athenians, but with a little sprinkling of you know, Istanbul idiom, just a sprinkling. And I disagree with this. I want the book completely in Istanbul Greek, but of course I always have the central Greek reader in mind. What I think of what they don't understand, and I try to give context. It's unfortunately something that English speaking readers are very used to. You know, if you're British reading an American book, and maybe a couple things you will have to understand from context or look up, and people don't seem to have that problem. Sometimes in Greece they're not used to that. Everything is being put into Central Greek, and I disagree with it. I think it destroys the richness of any language, not just Greek.
Was there a reason why you wrote it first in English? Did it just come that way, or?
Yeah, I wanted this to be an international book. I wanted internationally to stand up for our community and say, we're here and we're going to continue. Because most of the press about, and even some books about our community say they're done, they're the last, dwindling, or people don't even know that we still have a community here. Or the numbers are underestimated, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the great discoveries, I think, for many of us reading the book, is that we learned so much about this community. So look, I'll give it a brief summary here, and I'm going to read my notes because I have a tendency to go off, as my students know, I go off on so I'm going to stick to my notes. So the book opens with Fanis Paleologos. Oh, I messed it up. Paleologos, right? He's an Istanbuli. He's 76. He's a cantor. He has a beautiful voice. He's a widower and a womanizer, stylish, hair like Einstein, and he's surrounded in his life by a wonderful set of friends, great characters, all of them. And I'm looking forward to your reading, introducing some of them. And so, like Fanis, they are Rums, which is members of the Christian Orthodox community of Istanbul, which is at the core of the novel. And it seems to me he kind of embodies that community because, you know, he's carrying the past into the present with one eye on the future. You know, and that's maybe why, in spite of a health scare, he is determined, as the novel opens, to get married and have some kids. And he's extraordinarily optimistic about his chances of so doing. So that's perhaps why, with the arrival of Daphne, a young American woman from Miami, who is the niece of one of Fanis's friends, and she has come to Istanbul, I feel, to, you know, explore home and what home might mean for her and what Istanbul might mean for her. She's not too sure. It's the city of her parents. And in many ways, I think for the reader, perhaps, or generally, she represents the diluted diaspora of the same community. So Fanis, of course, decides immediately that this is the future mother of his children as he looks forward. But so too does another young man, Kosmas, who in his favor is a pastry chef, but on the other hand, he still lets his mother buy his clothes. So we go on from there, and it's a wonderful opening. So yeah, I was just going to ask you about the Rum community, and if you could, you know, tell us a little more about it and why you decided to write about it, or, you know.
Well, first, perhaps I should explain the word Rum. What exactly are we talking about? Who exactly are we talking about? So the Byzantines did not call themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romi, Romans. They called the empire the Roman Empire. And when the Ottoman Empire took over the Byzantine Empire, they continued to use the same word. Romios in Byzantine times was any citizen of the Byzantine Empire. When the Ottomans took over, they continued to use the same word, a Turkified version of the word, Rum, for the Orthodox Christians of the empire. So a Rum was any Orthodox Christian, regardless of what culture, heritage, or language he spoke. Of course, the main language of the Byzantine Empire was Greek, but there were other languages, and certainly during the Ottoman Empire, we're talking about a multi-ethnic community, multilingual. And the same word is used in modern Turkey for Orthodox Christians of Turkey. So that includes the Greek-speaking Rum of Istanbul, as well as the Arabic-speaking Rum of the province of Hatay, also of Mersin and Adana, which is that's southern Turkey, close to Syria. So many people, of course, call our community the Istanbul Greek community. I don't use the word Greek, first of all, because I don't want to imply that this is a recent transplant from Greece. And also because I want to be inclusive of all heritage, to be inclusive of the Arabic speakers who also, they come to Istanbul and they put their kids in the Greek school, so they become Greek speakers as well. And that's not something new, that's something that always happened during the Ottoman Empire. People would come from other parts of the empire. Orthodox Christians usually integrated into the Greek-speaking community. So they might have been speaking Albanian, they might have been speaking Vlach or other languages, and they came here and learned Greek. So the community today, the community was exempted from the population exchange in the 1920s when Muslims from Greece and Orthodox Christians from Turkey were forcibly exchanged. However, we had a pogrom in 1955, which is it's referred to in the novel. It's a small part of the novel, but it's part of Fanis's past. That was a blow to the community, but it was not the end. People really were determined to rebuild. And, but in 1964, those who had Greek passports, because even though they had never set foot in Greece, maybe their parents had never set foot in Greece, they had Greek passports remaining from when some of them had some ancestors come over here. Others, were from other parts of Turkey. But those who had Greek passports were forcibly, they were forced to leave Turkey. And that, because everyone was intermarried, that meant that a lot of people with Turkish passports also had to leave, because maybe your husband had a Greek passport and you had a Turkish passport. Of course, you're going to go with him. You're not going to separate the family. So many thousands left. Then we're talking about a community that used in the 1920s was about a third of Istanbul's population, and today we estimate of the native Greek speakers between 2,000 and 3,000. If we add in those with heritage from Hatay, we're maybe talking about 3,000 to 4,000 people. We're still here, and it's a very lively community. You would never know it was. We were so few with all of the events that we usually have during or before this craziness started. But we still, we're still going strong. We're still here, and we're going to keep going.
Absolutely, and I think your book is going to. I mean, I think a lot of the elements of the book have, put down on paper for a very broad audience. A lot of cultural aspects. One of the things that struck me was the homes. You put a lot of detail into the homes, and these are multi-generational homes where families have lived for a long time, and they're quite cluttered. There's heirlooms and antiques and icons, and the sense of those who have left. You feel very much like those who have passed on are still very much part of these homes. But presumably, a younger room generation is going to modernize, as happens in every culture. And those homes that you have captured so beautifully and evoke so well, I presume they're going to vanish in time, as they are vanishing all around the world in different communities. Is it? I'm thinking also of Fanis talking about dress, how people, the community likes to dress really well. And when he was younger, even stepping outside the door, everybody got dressed up. And he, on a depressed moment, he says, nobody dresses up anymore. And I have to say, I kind of agree with him about that. It is quite depressing. Nobody anywhere dresses up anymore. But, so that's kind of a tradition that's gone of dressing up. And the homes, I mean, it was wonderful being in those homes, in the kitchens in particular. I felt like I was sitting on a stool and I was just waiting for a cup of coffee from Gabriella. I don't even drink coffee, it's just so from that point of view, I think this book is so important because it has captured so many of the details and keeps them alive, and livens up the whole community for much further afield than just Turkey and Istanbul.
Well, thank you for saying that. That was part of my intention. I wanted anybody anywhere in the world to be able to feel like they are a part of our community for however long it takes them to read this book, that you're actually, you are a room with us, you are in Istanbul, in our houses, in our hearts. I think that talking about the community, it doesn't get people here, it doesn't get you into our houses, but this is what I wanted for this book.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I will remember as the homes very much. I mean, we can all relate to the externals of Istanbul, which you described beautifully, and we're all there, and whether we've been or not, we recognize it. But getting into those homes and those kitchens, for me, was a very special part of the book.
Well, then you're going to love my next book because it's even more inside.
It's lovely.
One apartment building, and it's the relationships between the people who live in that apartment building. So most of the book is inside their homes.
Perfect. I look forward to that. I really do.
Kitchens, lots of cooking.
Good. Yeah. Well, of course, the cooking is a huge part of it. You have a passage I think you were going to read about Fanis and his friends meeting over tea, and I think that gives a very good flavour of just their personalities and their wonderful humour. And I'll leave it to you now.
Okay. So let me just set the scene. They are sitting in a cafe, an outdoor cafe. Fanis is already on the scene. He is really the novel's main character, the elderly gentleman who Denyse mentioned. He's already there with his friend Aliki and his friend Julien, who are both in their 70s like he is. And suddenly Gabriella shows up with her niece. Just then, a 70-ish woman wearing a gold necklace that disappeared beneath her blouse, an obvious sign to the trained eye that she was a Christian or Jew who preferred to keep her religion private, approached arm in arm with a young woman who walked with the rod straight posture of a ballerina and the curious gaze of a foreigner. Kalispera, said Eliki in Greek. Good evening. Gabriela Theodorou, a remarried divorcee from the hilltop neighborhood of Tatavla, kissed her friends and said, "This is my niece, just arrived from America." Yet Gabriela had never made any mention of an American niece. That was rather strange, suspicious almost. Julien stood and pulled out his chair with a gallant sweep, a bow, and a chivalric turn of the wrist that ended in an upturned palm pointed at the chair. Kosmas also stood and offered his seat, but without any embellishments. Fanis tried to do the same, but the skinny gray cat, which had apparently resettled beneath his chair, screeched so loudly that it startled him, and he fell back down. "Stay where you are, sir," said the niece. "We only need two." Annoyed that he had been surpassed in gentlemanly conduct, Fanis waited until Julien and Kosmas had gone inside for more chairs. He took advantage of their absence to pull his seat over to the young ladies and ask, "What's your name, dear?" "Daphne." She gathered her loose hair, which undulated like the curls of a Minoan princess, and let it tumble down her back. "The most beautiful name there is," said Fanis. "Where are you from?" "Miami." He held out his hand. "Fanis." "Pleased to meet you," said Daphne. Her voice was nasal and her accent in Greek strange, something between Istanbul and Athens with a tinge of American. He grasped her fingertips as gently as he would an old tapestry. "What beautiful, natural nails you have. It takes pluck not to hide behind polish. I suspect you have quite a lot of fire in you." "Cut it out or you'll scare her away," said Julien, just returned with Kosmas and the extra chairs. "Now tell me, Daphne, what brings you to the city?" "A Turkish class." She twisted a tendril of hair around her finger. "Turkish?" said Rhea. "I'm thinking about a PhD in oral history." "How interesting," said Fanis. "Do you know, my dear Daphne, that you have the heavy eyelids of the last Ottoman sultans? But that's not surprising, because most of the sultans' mothers were Rum." "For how long will you be in the city, Daphne?" asked Julien. Gabriela removed her dark glasses and announced triumphantly, 5 weeks. Everyone hummed in satisfaction. It was long enough. "How old are you, dear?" asked Eliki. Fanis could have kissed Aliki's bristly cheeks. It was just what he wanted to know, but he made a point of never asking a man's salary or a woman's age. 32, said Daphne. Slightly young for Fanis, but he was sure he could win her. Instead of taking part in the usual chit-chat, he sat back in his chair and listened while each of his friends put forward what they considered the most important subjects. "Do you work, sweetie?" asked Rhea. "I'm a teacher." "Oh, that's the very best profession for a woman," said Eliki. Rhea smiled sweetly at her son, turned back to Daphne and asked, "Do you love children?" "Yes, but I don't always love their parents." "Are you married?" "Not yet." Fanis felt a secret tickle of delight, but he kept his hands folded across his belly as if these details held no importance for him. He watched the flexing and curling of Daphne's unpainted toes, and he suspected, despite her confident replies, that her fidgeting was an indication of a certain discomfort. "Good for you," said Julien. "Marriage destroys romance. Stay single if you want to have a good love life." "Still," said Eliki, "one gets lonely." "Don't worry, little mama," said Gabriela to her niece. "We'll find you a groom." "But you haven't told us," said Rhea. "Whose child are you?" "My aunt's sisters," said Daphne. Everyone laughed. Meanwhile, like any expert hunter, Fanis was completing the essential task of reconnaissance. The girl prickled at their questions, and her replies, although proper, were evasive. How he loved a mysterious woman.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a gorgeous passage, and it does introduce all the main players, so to speak. You know, can we have a short chat about Fanis, because you know, he's a literary, he's a lovable rogue, as they say, but he doesn't really fit into any literary box. You know, he really is a one-off. And he calls himself the last Byzantine, but he also calls himself a modern man. And you know, I feel like he is basically an optimist, even though at this stage of the book he's, you know, he is thinking a lot about the past. But you know, while he's reliving his tragic love affair with his fiancée, he's trying to woo Daphne and then Céline after that. But where did he come from? You know, how did you find him, or how did he find you?
Yeah, I wonder, did he find me or did I find him? So one evening, I was living in a flat on his street, Faik Pasha. And one evening I was looking out of my bay window, you know, one of those old Ottoman bay windows that they're kind of like a box. And it's a very beautiful street with old buildings. And I started writing about the street, actually, rather than the person, but from their perspective, not from my own perspective, from the perspective of an old man who had been born on that street, grown up on it, lived all his life on it, who had seen the pogrom of 1955, who has seen his neighbors deported, who had seen this beautiful historic neighborhood fall into disrepair. And then he had also seen it regentrified as it is now. So that's how Fanis was born. He is a bit crazy, outrageous. The book opens with him in the hospital. He's just blacked out. And he thinks that the doctor is the Greek god Hermes, in whom he believes. He also is planning on getting married. He's in his 70s. He's planning on getting married and having children. So we could say that he's ridiculous, you know, that's maybe or that he's even insane. But actually, I see Fanis as a metaphor for our community, because also Fanis is given a death sentence right on the first page. Or pretty close to it anyway. He's told he has vascular dementia and cerebral arteriosclerosis, and that if he doesn't take meds, these conditions could be fatal. And Fanis decides not to take his meds. So I see Fanis as a metaphor for the community, because we're given death sentences by the press all the time, if they even acknowledge our existence. It's always the last, and they're done, and in fact, even the 2,500 probably that we are is usually reduced to 1,000 or less in the press. But we are determined, just like Fanis, to reject all of those, the diagnosis, the death sentences. We don't really care what they say. We're still here, and we're going to go on. And in fact, all of this has been going on for a very long time. I heard a bishop recently who, in a speech, he said that when I was a young man in the 60s, they told us that we were the last. When I grew up, when I became a deacon and a priest, again, they said, you should all finish up and leave. And you're the last. And look, it's 2021 and we're still here.
Yes, and a good thing it is too. I mean, you know, you say Fanis could be ridiculous or whatever, but no, I've a bit of a crush. I've a bit of a crush on the old devil. And the only, you know, the only thing, he wouldn't take the meds. The only thing he was interested in the hospital was getting the Viagra. You know, I mean, that's a man with hope. I love it. So he's kind of main character. The other main character, of course, is Istanbul, and it is a love letter to Istanbul, this book. The city that entrances, and as Daphne says, you know, the city of surprises. You never know what's going to happen next, what's going to come around the corner. of course, it's one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, multicultural, multi-ethnic, as you said. And the rooms refer to it as the poli, the city, as if there is only one city. And does that present a kind of a paradox for the younger generation? I mean, like Kosmas, he loves Istanbul. He sees its contradictions and its challenges. But I suppose he wants to be there, but he's unsettled by the fact that even if he wanted to leave, he couldn't at this point leave. He's missed a kind of a window where he might have left. I mean, could you talk to us a bit about that, the poli and the relationship to Istanbul of this particular community?
Yeah, I think that Kosmas has a soul connection with Istanbul. And Daphne also discovers that she has one. Kosmas's passing thought about leaving, I think, has a bit more to do with the fact that it's very difficult to find a partner within such a small community if you want to marry within your own community, which Kosmas does want to do. And so I think really that's his biggest problem. Of course, there are difficulties. It's kind of like maybe a marriage. We're married to the city itself. And in any marriage, there are moments when you think, I just want to get out or something. So I think, Kosmas does have one of those moments in the book. Maybe he has more than, I can think of one offhand. But really, he doesn't want to leave at all. He's quite determined to stay. And I know so many people like that, they even study outside Turkey, like Kosmas, but return, and this is it. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Whatever happens, it's home.
Yeah. And you have a lovely reading, I think, about that moment for Kosmas is because it's such a beautiful description of the Bosphorus and Europe and Asia meeting.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite passages from the book. So Kosmas, again, is sitting in a cafe, but a different one this time. He's on the Bosphorus on a rainy day alone. He ordered a toasted cheese sandwich and settled down to watch the boats gliding between the Asian and European shores within the strait and across the mouth of the Sea of Marmara. Waves crashed against the quay and sprang up like fountains, leaving pools of salt water on the rough cement. On the other side of the inland sea, the mountains of Anatolia rose into low grey clouds. Kosmas wondered, as he always did while watching Istanbul's waters and the smooth movement of the ferries, why he still lived in the city of his isolation, where he didn't seem to have the slightest chance of ever finding a Rum wife. Perhaps he should have left long ago for America, Canada, Australia, or Greece, like everybody else. But now he had his patisserie and an aging mother on his head. It was too late. A waiter with a full tray of tea glasses made his way through the tables. Kosmas raised a finger. The man set a glass before him. The seagulls, which seemed to have more of a right to the city than anyone, uttered murderous cries when a hobby fisherman emptied a plastic bucket of fish heads onto the quay. Within minutes, nothing but a water blood trail remained. As Kosmas watched the poor Sunday fishermen casting their lines into the grey Bosphorus, he wished to God that he could be like Fanis, who knew the names of all the female cashiers at the local supermarket, never exited without saying hello to each, and sat in the tea garden like a pasha, while women of all ages came to kiss his cheeks and forehead. Kosmas, on the other hand, hadn't even worked up the courage to ask for Daphne's phone number. My God, he said out loud, if only you had made me like Fanis. And then he had it. He would go straight to the source, to Fanis, and ask the old rascal to become his mentor. He took his phone from his pocket, called Monsieur Julien, and scribbled Fanis Paleologos' phone number on a napkin.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful writing, and a sense of place. I'm delighted these days that there is now a category called travel fiction. You know, it didn't exist a few years ago, but now it's got its own, you know, category, and I think it's a good thing too. I was interested, speaking about Istanbul, I was interested that you, I read in an interview with you that when you were looking for an agent and a publisher, you were told that the novel needed more bombs. And this really resonated with me, because when my novel based in Yemen, and you know, long before the current war started, it was nibbled at by you know, the film industry, and so it went off to the East Coast of the West Coast of America. It came back with the rejection based on the fact that there weren't enough explosions. And in fact, there were no explosions in the book at all. And I just, you know, it is very frustrating, isn't it, as a writer, that, you know, when you're writing about certain parts of the world, you know, somebody thinks you have to pay into these assumptions and presumptions, whereas in fact, what you're trying to do is say, look, on the street, you know, the man on the street is just getting on with his life, and that's where the stories are, you know. Yeah. You must have found that very, very disheartening, that, you know, you needed more bombs in such a life force of a book, you know, in particular.
Yeah, well, of course, the novel is set in 2011 and 2012. There weren't any terrorism attacks at all at that time. So then I was asked, well, what could you set it in a year where you have them? Because that's what we expect of Istanbul, which, you know, I am willing to, I'm really a ruthless editor. I will throw anything away if it is not serving, but I will not rewrite to fit the news feed or to fit prejudice against places, my place, Istanbul, but I don't think it should be done. Unfortunately, this is, you know, this sort of thinking is applied to most books about the Middle East, including fiction, that it has to fit the newsfeed. It has to fit the narrative about the Middle East. And so thank God for Hoopoe fiction, which is part of the American University in Cairo Press. The mission of Hoopoe is to present stories from the Middle East as they are, without trying to fit anybody's narrative. Yeah. So, you know, it was from that perspective, it was a perfect fit. You know, I find all of this stuff goes on even after the publishing of the book. You know, before the publishing, I was told by certain editors and even people I respected that, well, it's nice, but I'm not moved by the plight of the rooms. And then afterwards, yeah, and then afterwards, because it's not fitting certain politics. I mean, I've been cut out of Greek television. I've been cut out of Greek radio shows. It's been seriously, because it doesn't fit. They only want the victim narrative about our community, and I'm not presenting a victim narrative. In fact, I think it's very important to me that we do not continue this victim mentality, because if you continue that, you're not going to survive. So we have to, in fact, we don't have that, really. We're looking toward the future and doing the best that we can with our new circumstances, because everybody has new circumstances now. Istanbul is not the same city as it was 50 years ago, and that has nothing to do with whether you are a part of a minority or not. It's, you know, it's a monstrous. It's cities, yeah. And then I've also been cut from other news coverage, because I do refer to some of the things like the pogrom. You know, it's often about fitting people's agenda. Fortunately, however, you just keep trying and you keep trying, and you find people who are actually looking for something new, for something different, and who are not interested in in telling a story that's already been decided upon.
Yeah, and it is the news feed. I mean, and I'd just like to echo what you said about Hoopoe Fiction in Cairo. You know, what a joy and what a great objective that, and they publish us both. And you know, likewise, when I was doing the rounds after my Yemeni book was published, there was a tendency to want to talk about women. You know, Arab women, aren't they just, you know, downtrodden and walking down, you know, all the cliches. And you know, one of the reasons I wrote it was partly to celebrate Yemeni women who, you know, are just extraordinary women. You know, they just had so much to say, but that wasn't. It was all about the veil and, you know, not all the careers they had and the work they were doing. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that. Getting back to Daphne and her recipe, it's a very funny book. And, you know, as I say to my students, you know, writing funny is hard. And it's grossly underrated. And you always hear people say, you know, when did a funny book last win the Booker? And when did a comedy last win an Oscar? You know, it's so overlooked and it's so vital. And at the moment, I mean, to give somebody a laugh, I think is a great gift. And I actually quoted one of your lines in my class last week, totally out of context. It was completely out of context. I think it was Daphne looking at the rather small lady who's, you described the table coming up to her armpits, and Daphne wondering, you know, should she maybe call for a booster seat? It just works. So, and your characters they all have a very dry wit, which we love in Ireland. You know, we love a one-liner. We have a very dry, ironic wit. Your women get some of the best lines, and the dialogue as well is enhanced, you know, by the multilingual interplay of words and expressions and the crisscross of idiom. It works, you know, really well. But you know, it sounds like it's coming right off the street. That humor, you know, it must be a very engaging place to be, you know, amongst these people who just have the dryness. Of course, they're quite bawdy as well. Everybody's checking out everybody else's ass. I mean, I love the bawdiness of it. Nobody's afraid of, you know, throwing in sex or a sexual point of view into anything, but they're wonderful creations.
Yeah, you know, so much of it really just comes quite naturally out of Istanbul, out of the way that both Rooms and Turks speak. There is so much humor, you know, even about bad things, people seem to be able to laugh a lot of the time. And I'm sure you have had the same experience. And actually, that was another issue for me, because although, as you said, that, you know, humor is not always so acceptable anywhere, it's certainly not acceptable coming out of the Middle East. We're supposed to be sad, but it's the exact opposite. Everybody is laughing and making jokes all the time. I mean, really, I'm just thinking about a bus driver who you ask the bus driver, is this bus going to this destination? And he says, it seems so. You know, everywhere you turn, you've got humor. So really, it does come straight out of life. And the way that we have within our community of dealing with everything, even problems, with humor. Yeah.
Well, as I say, you know, you've got this balance between the humorous and yet, you know, the shadows and the darkness. But there's so many laugh out loud moments, and it's characterization is so strong, you know. It's sort of just expressed, I suppose, in this dry humor, which, you know, our bus drivers, our taxi drivers are the same in Ireland. You know, it comes out of hardship, maybe, as you were saying, you know, and what you were saying, you know, about Istanbul and preconceptions and what's expected. I mean, we had that in Ireland through the 70s and 80s, and now we live on an island in peace, thank God. But we used to travel and people expected, they were almost surprised we were up on 2 feet, because isn't it all war where you come from, so it's the news feed. Okay, let's finally get to cakes and pastries and recipes. My God, it's impossible to read this book without food to hand and and a nice cup of tea. But it's not really just about pastries. I mean, there's kind of a connection between your book and pastries, but it's all sorts of foods throughout it, and beautifully presented and mouth-watering when you're reading about it. And you just feel you're sitting at the day they go out to Alinka's place, and the lunch is just on the table, and you just feel like, I'm going to sit down here now and just take a minute with all this. But I was interested that when it comes to pastries and chocolates and sweets of all sorts, the characters are really, really careful about, selecting the right sweet. They're careful in their friendships and in their seduction techniques, I suppose, to get the right flavor, for the right person for the right occasion. Mm-hmm. And so it is that Kosmas, master pastry chef, decides to woo Daphne by resurrecting this long lost, long forgotten cake, I suppose, pastry called the balkanak. And I think that was your inspiration for the book, wasn't it? That you read about the balkanak.
I heard about it. It was one of my inspirations. I heard an elderly gentleman talking about it pretty much in the same way that it comes up in the church tea salon in the book. He says, I remember a pastry called the balkanik, and he described it. He said it was something like a big eclair. It had lots of differently flavored creams inside, and each cream represented one of the Balkan peoples, so that the pastry as a whole represented harmony between the different Balkan peoples. And because harmony between people with different cultures and religions is something that fascinates me and something that we have here in Istanbul, I knew that I wanted to write about this pastry. Also, this elderly gentleman said that it was a lost pastry. Nobody makes it anymore. Nobody remembers how to make it anymore. And I think there are a couple of people now making a version of it, but it's not what was described to me. I've only heard 2 or 3 times references to this pastry, and nobody from people above 80. So I wanted to write about a pastry chef who would resurrect this recipe. And would you like me to read a tiny bit?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
So this is the scene. This is after church in the tea room, where somebody brings up, it's Fanis who brings up the balkanik. Kosmas is present, and also Daphne and Gabriela and quite a few other people. Fanis, whose voice was still a little raspy from chanting, said, "The Queen Mother was the balkanik." "I asked Uncle Mustafa about that pastry," said Kosmas. He picked up Daphne's fallen napkin, gave it to the mustachioed man, and handed Daphne a new one from the stack he had used to demonstrate butter layering. He described it to me as best he could: the choux pastry, the consistency and flavors of the creams, the unique way in which they were piped. I actually made a first attempt, but it fell short of Uncle Mustafa's memories. You see, making a good chocolate, cardamom, cinnamon, or pistachio cream isn't a big deal, but I haven't been able to figure out how so many flavors can complement each other in one pastry without turning into a discordant mess. The recipe was lost, said Fanis. Anything you make now will be a poor imitation, an impostor balkanik. Somebody must have written it down, said Daphne. Perhaps we could contact the families of other old pastry chefs. Even if the recipe could be found, said Gabriela, you have to remember that the balkanik was a pastry for parties. Where would you eat it now? With which friends? We used to drink our tea every day at 5 o'clock. We used to play cards on Tuesdays, do something else on Wednesdays, go dancing on Fridays and Saturdays. to church on Sundays, and to the buffets after church. Every day there was something to do, and there was always a pastry to go with it. Now there's nobody left. Excuse me, Gabriela, said Fanis, but who are we? Nobody? So here it's almost like one reviewer, Dean Kalimnio from Australia, wrote that this was like an anti-Proustian moment, because in Proust, the narrator bites the Madeleine, and that takes him back in time, where the flavor leads him to the memory, to the story. But here it's the memory and the story which are leading Kosmas toward the flavor and toward the pastry.
Very interesting. Yeah, interesting. What is your relationship with food? I mean, there's a description of Kosmas cooking for Daphne in the kitchen, and I was going, either you did a lot of really nice research, or you're quite a good chef yourself. Do you cook yourself?
Yes, I cook. We almost never go out to eat, and there are always my husband, who loves pastries, cakes, and sweets very much, is quite happy that I make sure that there's always a sweet in the house, except for today, because I'm with you today. But
Sorry.
But this evening or tomorrow morning, I will have to make one.
Yeah.
So yes, I do. I love cooking, but I also love talking about cooking, especially with my elders. So I love learning what they do, what they used to do. And it's just as much a part of the culture as humor is. So we're talking about food all the time. So much food culture.
I tried to research the Balkanic as well. I mean, I just, I Google, I couldn't find anything about it anywhere. And it's such a marvelous sort of symbol, I suppose, of people, people coming together and being together to create a wonderful home. So if it's ever made, do let us know. And I should alert the audience too to your wonderful Instagram feed, and Twitter, where you put up photos of the meals that are eaten, and the various traditions, and also the various places. I mean, it's a wonderful feed, and I congratulate you on it, because it's just lovely to see it. Yeah, there was we're kind of winding up. I do have a couple of questions here, which I'll have a look at as I okay, this is a question. It's coming from an anonymous member of the audience. Can you tell us something about the decision to have Fanis be considerably older than Daphne, but still feeling that he is in with a chance? Is this a cultural nod or a recognition of how things are still slanted in this way for the sexes?
Actually, I had Fanis was in his 80s to begin with, but I was told by someone that American readers at least would not accept that. I had to make him younger because they would find it just too awful for an 80-year-old man to be chasing a 30-year-old woman. I don't really see this as a question of things being slanted anyway, as far as for toward one sex or the other. Really, it's just we don't grow old on the inside, and so there's nothing to whether you're a man or a woman. You can be attracted to someone much younger than you.
One of the joys of the stories is the older love stories. It's not all about a bunch of young people, and oversexed youngsters. It has this lovely acceptance that very late in life people are still falling in love, still fancying somebody, and I think it's beautifully handled from that point of view. I have a question. It is about the Balkanic, and it came in before you explained it. So I'll read it out anyway. What is the history of the actual recipe Kosmas is trying to find for Daphne? The whole book was salivating. I kept wanting to fly to Istanbul to eat all the pastries. And I must come out with my hands up and say that's my daughter in New York who sent that question. And I think I told you, I gave her the book after I read it, and she read it flat in 2 days. So yeah.
Well, I'm so happy that is the book got you salivating, and we do have lovely pastries. So that's really as much history as I know. I tried very hard to find more history. I didn't find it, but actually I'm glad I didn't, because sometimes you can know too much. You know, it's nice to keep a few things in the imagination. Of course, some people are not happy with me because I do not have the recipe.
It's mysterious. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's okay to have a bit of mystery, and you know, you've revived it in a way. You have revived it.
I'll share any recipe, but I have to say that even if I had that one, I probably wouldn't, because I think it's one that has to stay in the imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Keep it mysterious. Yeah, I agree with that. Now, there's just one other comment from Una Montague, who said she liked you saying the first draft is rubbish. That is funny and reassuring, which of course, I always say to you know, first timers or people who are beginning, just get to the finishing line. You know, just go for it. Don't stop. Don't edit. Just get to the end. And if you get there, then you can start editing.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things with going back to and we're nearly winding up now, to the recipe. There is a very moving part in the book, which I can't really say too much about, because it's too near the end and it would spoil it, but it is a gift of books, and real tearjerker at that moment, you know, amongst many tear-jerking moments in it. You'll know the moment I mean, as well, for people who are reading, who have read it already. And just quickly about your current projects, you know, I think you're right, you're extending into a novel your prize-winning story, The Way to Baghdad, in Greek dialect.
No, not The Way to Baghdad. A prize-winning story, but the one that won the Zografios Agon, so it's in Greek. And in fact, it's finished. I'm just having some people read it right now to give me some feedback. It's again, the narrator is a woman in her 70s, Rum. Most of the story takes place within her apartment building. So she is a lifelong enemy with the Jewish woman who lives beneath her. It's an apartment building that was once full of Jewish and Rum families, and as has happened in so many old apartment buildings in Istanbul, it's been mostly filled up with offices. So the only people who are left are two Rum who never married and are still living there, the Jewish lady beneath my narrator, and also it's involved with one office, an architectural office, with a Greek woman architect and a Turkish man architect. So it's the relations between these people. It has to do with anti-Semitism, because my character is my narrator is anti-Semitic, and she has to confront that her prejudices in this novel. It's set in 2016, which, yes, it is the year that we had some terrorist attacks, so maybe people will be happy with that. But it's in Greek anyway. So it was a challenge, because I really wanted to write about anti-Semitism at the level of, you know, at the gossipy level, you know, where sometimes you hear people saying things like, Jews put blood in matzah for Pesach, or, you know, now we hear maybe the Jews are behind this global situation, that sort of thing. You know, that gossipy kind of stuff. I wanted to get at that, and then, but really it focuses on that one relationship with the lady downstairs. And also with the two young architects who one of them has a past that we discover in the course of the novel. And it's also about the single life, because the main characters of this novel, I think one of them is a divorcee, but all of the rest have never been married. So
Wow.
it's a friendship. It's a friendship novel, really. I mean, there is a romance in the background because there are many chapters go into the past life of this narrator, but really it's about friendship, and especially friendship between single people who become sort of like family for each other.
And I love that you have so many characters who are older. We need more of that in fiction. Sorry?
The most important thing is that it's written in Istanbul Greek completely, which really we do not have much of that. And I'm sure that's something you can understand as well, in Ireland, having to struggle for your language. It's something that we need to do here. But although I can't say it's really a struggle for me because I love it so much that I love writing it.
Yeah. And you're a great storyteller, and so the result is can only be good. I'm just going to read some of your great reviews. A Recipe for Daphne is a delightful novel about finding home in foreign places. Lovely line from Forward Reviews. A charming and engaging story full of wise insights about human nature and thoughts about the challenges facing the Greek community in Istanbul. Professor Delange from Cambridge University. And then Hannah Lucinda Smith wrote, if you have ever been to Istanbul, you will recognize its sumptuously written characters and places. If you have not, it will make you want to go immediately. And the Washington Post wrote, it is also a novel to be thoroughly savored from its enticing culinary elements to its charming love stories. So, well done and congratulations. And I'm sure the word is spreading about this book. Before I finish off, I wanted to read a tiny passage. Can I do that? Can I be so cheeky?
Thank you.
It's just that there are two moments that really will stay with me. One is the gift of books that I mentioned earlier. And this is the bishop talking both to Fanis and Kosmas at the butcher at the barber's. And I suppose it struck me because it's really about this is a story about older people who are concerned about whether the younger people are going to get married, but this is about the next generation, and that's why I love it. And he says, I've wanted to talk to you about this. It's something I've wanted to talk to you about for some time, Kosmas. Ever since I was ordained, my absolute favorite thing has been the presentation of an infant when it is 40 days old. I take the baby in my arms and carry it to the front of the church. Most of the time, it keeps its eyes on me, except for the moment when I pass beneath the dome. Absolutely every baby I've ever presented shifts its gaze to Christ at that moment as if it knows it is meeting its maker. I think that's just a beautiful passage and maybe nice to end on because it's all about the next generation and being big. Mind you, he does then go on to say to Kosmas, get on with it. We need some children. But, listen, what better combination than love and pastry? And you've absolutely nailed it. And we've, I've learned a great deal about your community, and I'm much the richer for it. So thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sort of in Bantry. Thanks.
And thank you to Nektaria and to Denyse. That was absolutely brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to head off now and get myself some cake, definitely.
Me too. Me too.
I adored your book. In a year when travel has been difficult for so many people, I really felt like I was in Istanbul. And I would encourage everybody to go out and read it. It's just such a marvelous story and so beautifully written. And I really felt like I was in that city, and it's somewhere I've wanted to visit for a long time. So hopefully your book will inspire me to make that happen whenever we're allowed.
I'm looking forward to meeting you here and also to coming to Ireland someday whenever we're allowed to.
Definitely.
Oh, you must. You know where to come. You know where to find us.
Yeah, we have very good pastries in Bantry.
Okay.
That's it. And we're very good at making tea. And we're very particular about our tea in Ireland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you to you both. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our audiences. And I hope you all have a lovely evening and a lovely weekend wherever you are.
Thanks, Emer.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Nektaria. Lovely to meet you. Bye.